Welcome back to the Keegan and Company podcast. For those who are new to the show, my name is Keegan Hipgrave. And guys, if you haven't already, could I get you to jump over? Hit that little like and subscribe button on whatever platform you do listen to this podcast on. It is a really great way for us to grow this podcast, grow this platform, and just encourage conversation and push these messages like I spoke today. In this episode, we spoke to one of the greats, professional surfer, India Robinson. We had an incredible morning. We got a beautiful little wave out at Currumbin, into a coffee, into the podcast. It was cool to chat to her about her journey. India's struggled with concussions over the last couple of years, very similar to myself. So it was cool to unpick that and what she's learned and where she's at now and the journey to get back onto the professional circuit. We spoke about values and confidence and body image, and there was so many really great golden nuggets in this conversation. Guys, enjoy. India Robinson, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, what a beautiful morning. Out of 10, how excited are you being back in the water?
100.
How sick, but so good to have a little surf this morning, hey?
Oh, it's so good. Like, just even the small things, like seeing the sunrise and the waves weren't like perfect, but seriously, just standing up on a wave with like the sun, like there's nothing better. I got there this morning,
just for people who are listening, like we went to Crummanally on the Gold Coast this morning, and we're like, try and get like a little wave. Obviously there's not many waves around. I got there at like 5 o'clock and it was like already windy. It was like howling. I was like, far out, this is gonna suck. But then we like got out there. It was like such a beautiful sunrise, such a great way to start the morning.
Yeah, I don't think anything's better than going for a quick like early morning surf, like just get wet, start the day in the right kind of way.
I don't know about you, but like even like that's like the sunrise piece, getting in, having a coffee, seeing some crew, like that's how I want to start like almost every day. Hey.
Yeah. I feel like, well, that's honestly how I normally start most of my days. And if I like having to miss it and stuff like that, like it does have an effect. So like being in that routine, surfing every morning, it has a very positive effect on me.
I did mention like you've been out of the water for 4 months now, and I'm keen to talk about, you know, obviously all the concussions, the operation you had, and the whole, you know, roller coaster of professional sport and surfing and that. But before we do get to that, I'd love to talk about what growing up in the Robinson household looked like. Like obviously you got 3 older brothers. Like I imagine probably a pretty wild competitive environment. What did growing up look like?
Yeah, chaos was probably the word that I'd use. No, I'm so fortunate to have like the parents that I do, and they raised us in such a way that like they let us do everything that we were passionate about, and they really supported us with whatever we wanted to do. And my brothers, like they were hard on me for sure. Like I was just like a fourth brother to them. Like I wasn't seen as a little sister. I was seen as like, no, you've got to, if you want to do what we're doing, like stick with us.
You were telling me the story this morning. You're like, could you tell us at Snapper? What was it?
Yeah, it was at Snapper. Yeah. My first time up to the Goldie for a competition, I was like 12 years old, and it was my first time surfing Snapper, and my dad just said, follow your brothers. They'll show you like what to do, how to get out and everything. And my brothers being brothers, they kind of like ran ahead, and I just followed them, and they went onto the rocks and they were going to jump off, and I followed them onto the rock, and they jumped off. They didn't really help me out, and then I was standing there and a wave just clocked me and went set flying back into the rocks.
Yeah, thanks boys.
All hell broke loose, and I got a spraying, they got a spraying from my dad, and so honestly, like they taught me how to keep up with them.
It's like the perfect, just like typical older brothers like story, like keep up or you're just going to get left behind. You're like, I'm just going to jump off the back rock. It was like 3-4 foot or whatever. Yeah.
And then, I got a rude awakening of, okay, that's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And now I know what to do and what not to.
But grew up in Victoria.
Yes.
So obviously when did the surfing piece come into it?
Yeah, so my dad got me on a board when I was 3 years old, so very, very young. He did that with all of us. He just wanted us, like we live right near the beach, near Bells and Winky, and he just wanted us to have that piece in our life. And so we all grew up at a really young age surfing, and it was cold, it was freezing. I went through a phase when I was like 7 years old where I just wanted to do the other sports, and I was so passionate about team sports.
What other sports were you doing?
I was doing netball, basketball, dance, swimming, gymnastics, like literally every sport you can imagine, just so I could feel out what was like my niche.
Yeah.
And then I found soccer, and I was really, really into soccer.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of my path, I thought. And I started to do a few state soccer tournaments, and I thought that was going to be it. And then, when I was in year 6 at primary school, they had a beach day where they were going to run a school surf competition. And I was like, I'll do it just because I get to go to the beach with my mates.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing the competition and somehow got a medal and went home, and I was like, Dad, I got a medal for surfing. Like, I really want to like keep getting medals for surfing.
Yeah, gotcha.
And from that point on, I kind of went into like board riders and local grom comps, and then I just fell in love with winning. And then the surfing aspect combined with winning, I was like, oh, this is me. Like,
Do you reckon you were always a competitive kid?
Yeah. Always competitive, but I really loved the team aspect. So shifting into a sport that was like just me, that was a pretty hard thing to navigate, and I didn't want to let go of the soccer because I loved the team aspect. So that was a bit of a shift, but yeah, it was once I kind of clocked that feeling, I was like really into it.
Do you think that's why you like board riders and stuff like that? Because it kind of has that team environment to it, yeah?
Yeah, and the tag teams, like I love the tag teams because we're working together and you have that like, oh, I'm supporting you, you're supporting me. And even in like when I'm traveling professionally, like I'm making sure I'm surrounding myself with friends and people that genuinely want to see me succeed and I want to see them succeed, just so that we can lean on each other and support each other away from home. Yeah. And that's kind of my way of getting a little bit of that team.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a super interesting piece, right? Like the crew that you're knocking around with. That's I love that you said that, because you see it, like you can see it all the time, especially, and we're talking about it a lot. Especially in Australia, like that, almost like that tall poppy syndrome. Like as soon as someone like gets that little bit ahead, they're like, oh, how do we bring them back? But I just did a trip over to the States, and they're so much for like, how do we help you? Who do we introduce you to other people? How can we like help you grow into whatever you want to do? And I see pockets of it here on the Gold Coast in Australia. Maybe it's just the crew that we're knocking around with, but it's like there's a lot of people who are just like, how can we help? How can we help? And how can we actually like see you succeed? Which is it sounds like you've got a good little circle that you knock around with, yeah? I've
definitely got my core group, and I'm so privileged in the support that like the AIS and Surfing Australia kind of let us tap into and stuff like that. And I think it's like the most important piece is like having people you can lean on when kind of stuff does get hard. So me making that move from Victoria up to close to the Goldie and stuff, that was hard because I left my family, but I also moved up with my best friends, and I also had coaches that were like father figures and people like mentors that really did like care and look after me, and they still do. So that's the piece where I'm so fortunate to have that.
At what age did you start to think that this could become a full-time thing, or something that you wanted to do as a full-time thing? Because I talk to a lot of crew, especially on this podcast, they might have either had a lot of success at a young age, and obviously when you're having success and winning comps, it's like, oh, this is something that I'm actually enjoying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or the flip side to that, they actually worked really hard, they got knocked back from a couple of representative teams, or they might have lost a few comps, which actually gave them the drive. Was there a point in your like junior experience where you're like, oh, this is actually something that I want to do professionally?
Yeah, it was like after literally I got that first medal.
Gotcha.
Like I was into it, and I was never I was always 100% with whatever I did.
Yeah.
So that's when, even when it came to doing soccer and surfing, I was like, if I actually want to do surfing, I have to let that go.
Really? You couldn't do both?
No, because the competitions for surfing were on the weekends, and so were the soccer tournaments.
Gotcha.
So when I was like, if I actually want to be the best, then I'm actually going to put my head down and go for it. And that's one thing I'd say has gotten me to where I am, is I'm not probably the most naturally talented compared to some of my peers. Like they were, the girls I was surfing against in junior comps, they were more talented than me for sure. but I just knew that I had like something in me that was like, I'm going to outwork you.
Yeah.
And even from a young age, I was like, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do I'm not going to do coffee. I'm going to do things that like might prohibit them from getting a step further. I was like, oh, if I stay away from that and just be 100% into training, gym, what I'm eating, like surfing a bunch, then maybe I can get a step ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that like mindset from such a young age was gnarly for sure, but it was just like nothing's going to stop me if I really want it.
Where do you think that comes from? Because that's like, it's probably pretty rare for someone so young to have that thought process so young where it's like, no, I'm going to do all the little 1%ers.
Yeah. I honestly think from the youngest of ages, I just knew I wanted to be a professional athlete.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what sport it was going to be, but I just knew that I wanted to be the best at something. So I thought it was going to be soccer. But then when I found surfing and I knew that I had little pieces to me that were different, like the style of surfing I have is very power based kind of surfing. And there was only a few girls like Carissa Moore. She was kind of like the leader for the girls in bringing that to like a world stage. And I really looked up to that. So I kind of knew that if I could kind of really work on that could kind of get me somewhere. Because
that was my next question. If you like, because you know, when you see something that sort of like in your head, you're like, oh, well, if you've seen it, you can do it. You know what I mean? If you can't see it, like if you can't see, you know, female professional athletes, and it's like, well, how am I supposed to get there if you can't see it? Whereas just like you see Carissa and someone like that. Who were the role models that you were looking up to? Was it Carissa?
So from a young age, it was like you said, there was not as much females, and in Victoria especially, I was just surfing with all the boys.
Yeah.
So honestly, I grew up kind of surfing the way that they were surfing, which definitely helped me because most guys have that power-based surfing as well. And then I started going to the Rip Curl Pro at Bells Beach, and I started doing board caddying.
Yeah.
And so I was holding all of my favourite surfers' boards, and I was just standing on the beach, and I watched all of their waves because I'm like watching to see if they break their board.
Yeah.
So I'm just there every day for 12 hours, just like watching every heat, holding their boards. And I was like just obsessed with the way that Carissa and Mick surfed. And I was like, wow, like Mick's style and his patience on a wave, but Carissa's power and aggression is like perfect. So how can I combine the two? And so I'd just like watch what they were both doing and try to implement little things and just watch hours and hours of like those two because I loved them.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that you're combining the two. It's sort of like you're taking the best parts of what and like how you want to surf,
yes.
right? And then I imagine when you're out surfing, you're just like slowly implementing these little things that you've seen.
Yeah, like the repetition of like, okay, yeah, the way that I'm not obviously going to imitate what Carissa's doing, but I want to do a turn like her that's in my own kind of way. Yeah, so just watching and then learning like the intricate details of what that turn entails, like, and then just doing it a bunch.
Yeah, is that the piece, like to try and get something down, like whether it's a turn down, it's just over and over and over again?
Yeah, it's the repetition piece. Like if, for instance, we take a jet ski out, we get like 50 waves in an hour just repeating the same turn. And within that hour, you could do that turn, like just, but then if you go for a normal surf, you get 10 waves a session.
Yeah.
It takes a bit longer. Yeah. So finding, and even wave pools, like you can work on so many things because you catch so many waves.
Are you jumping in wave pools often?
I do a fair bit. Like it's very hard to balance because it is so different to the ocean. But if there's a specific turn or if I'm working on a specific thing and I want to catch a bunch of waves, then I'd go to the wave pool.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting because we've done urban surf in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Haven't tried the Sydney one yet, but I was just like, it's a perfect wave. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's literally a perfect wave. It's so sick. There was one part of your, I guess, like childhood that I'm keen to zoom in on. You got sponsored. Pretty at a pretty early age. What did that look like and how did that affect you going into the, I guess, like the pro, semi-pro series?
Yeah. So I got approached by like the Dream brand when I was like 12. And they were local around the Torquay area.
Who's that?
Roxy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was sponsored by them at a really young age, and I was just over the moon, like literally just sticker straight on the board. Like,
Dream.
yeah, I thought I was so good.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, I fit in. Like all of my friends are sponsored. Like I'm sponsored too. Like let's go. And then, yeah, I started traveling a lot more, going like overseas, internationally, and it just slowly started to feel like I wasn't myself anymore, and I was falling into bad habits with like trying to fit an image that was like not me at all. So
What do you mean?
with Roxy and surf brand specifically, especially a few years ago, it was if you're a surfer and you're female, we want you to also be a model, and we want you to be able to push bikinis and stuff for us by being like posing in front of the camera and wearing certain stuff. And that just wasn't me. I was like, oh, I'm a really good surfer. Like, is that not enough? And so I started to then get really self-conscious around how I looked, because I'm built so much bigger and stronger, and that's how I train. That's how I wanted to be, because I wanted to be the strongest athlete. And then when I started to see that that wasn't looking the same as the other girls in photos, I started to get really like anxious about how I looked. And so I stopped wearing shorts, because I was like, oh, my legs are like really big compared to these other girls. So I went, I was looking at a photo the other day, my first ISA World Surfing Games in America. It was like 35 degrees. You just went to Oceanside, right?
I did, yeah.
It gets hot.
Yeah,
it was
does,
so hot. And
sure.
we had the opening ceremony where we have to walk for like an hour holding the flags in the sun, just sweating. Everyone was in shorts and t-shirt. I'm the only one in the photo wearing long pants.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And now like I'm in a place where I'm like, gosh, I love how powerful my legs are. They help me so much. I love what my body can do. But back then, being such a young kid, not knowing who I am and what I should be, I kind of just fell into that pressure of trying to fit an image that this sponsor was wanting from me. And it wasn't until things started to get a lot worse for me, and it was affecting my surfing, my lifestyle. I wasn't happy, and I was having like really, really nervous, like anxious times. I was really depressed at the time, and I didn't know what to do. And people could see that around me. They could see that I was struggling. And one of the mentors that has helped me so much at Surfing Australia kind of sat me down, and that's when she ran me through like, what are your values? And just pick a few cards, tell me what you value in life.
How old were you at the time?
I was 16 when she pulled me into that room.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, I imagine a lot of girls would go through probably like similar like body issue conversations or thoughts, right?
Yeah.
But then imagine putting that on a very, not the world stage, but a very higher stage where you've got videographers, photographers around. You're surfing. You're getting paid to be a part of a brand, right? The dream brand as well.
Yeah.
So I imagine that would just heighten all those thoughts and all those emotions.
Yeah, it was so gnarly. Like I can't even express like being in that environment, being surrounded by their top models, which don't get me wrong, if you're a model, great. And that's what you love doing. But to put an athlete in that environment with those girls was like, I do not belong here. I don't look like you. And you're now putting those photos out to the world, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And now all the world can judge it as well as me. I'm already judging myself 10 times harder.
Yeah. Do you, you're obviously probably too young to have a conversation with the sponsor to be like, no, this is actually like, can I just be the surfer?
Yeah. So that's where it got really tricky, because I got results. Like my junior career was very good, and I was I was one of the best in Australia. So it was like, okay, why is that not enough? And I went to another ISA World Games, and I got second to Caroline Marks, who's now world champ. But I got second there, and I came back, and it was kind of time to negotiate contracts and whatnot. And they were pretty much just like, we don't have budget for you. And I was like, oh, what? I've just like got second. Like, is that not enough? And they were like, yeah, but like your social media presence, and, you know, we just kind of need to provide money for girls that can help us in other areas as well. And I was just like, oh, so you're literally validating what I've been feeling. Like, you're telling me that I'm not enough and that what I'm doing isn't enough. So that's when it was kind of like a crossroads for me. I was like, okay, I could either do what they're wanting, change myself completely to fit them, and I'll probably end up getting a better contract or getting endorsed more or whatnot. But if I do that, then I'm going to be the worst athlete and I won't be happy.
I tell you what I love about this conversation is that you took the ladder.
Yeah.
And that you took the performance and wanting to be strong and healthy, compared to the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, talk to me about when you sat down with the crew from Surfing Australia and you said, "Well, what are your values? What do you do?"
Yeah.
Was that, like you said, like that was a turning point?
Yeah.
Run me through that conversation.
Yeah, so I didn't even know what values were at this point. It was pretty much just like there was cards all on the table, and she was like, just pick cards that you resonate with and what you think you value. So I picked out like 7 or so cards, lined them up, and she's like, well, this is what you're telling me, this is what you value.
Well, like, give me some examples. Like, what were you thinking?
So it was like strength, honesty, happiness, trust, commitment, and everything that was like related to health and performance and being happy pretty much were the values. And that's, of course, that's what I valued in life.
Yeah.
And then we looked at the values of what this brand, their values are and what they're wanting, polar opposite. What they are wanting and what their values are, they're not what my values are. So I can either do what they're wanting, that's not me. Like I could see it, and just being able to see on that table that that's not me, this is who I am. I was so confident leaving that room, just going, rip the sticker off, send an email, we're done.
Really?
Like, so confident and content with that decision. And it was like the weight of the world just lifted off my shoulders.
I love that. And but also probably a really great learning piece, because then you're like, well, these are my values. What other brands actually align with my values, and what are the things that I want to be doing, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So now when it comes to speaking with brands and stuff, the first thing I do is ask them what their values are and what they're wanting to achieve. Yeah. Because I'm not going to align myself again with a brand that's not going to, one, help me and encourage me to keep fulfilling my journey and dreams and stuff. But I'm also not going to promote a brand that is against everything I'm going for.
I think about that conversation all the time, especially with the podcast.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking like mental health and sport, like gambling and probably alcohol probably doesn't quite align with like positive mental health, right?
Yeah.
The only thing is like alcohol, I guess there could be a community element to it, or a socializing element to it. Yeah. Which I am pro. Obviously without like, drink responsibly and everything like that. But I just still don't think even that would come through. Like I love like working with like Whoop and like even like Lululemon and P3 Recovery and crew like that who like promote like positive exercise and diet and recovery and things that are good for your mental health. And so I love that you said that, because that I'm sitting in it at the moment. So it's like, well, who do you want to align with?
Yes.
So what are some values that you look to for brands that like, I guess you want to be involved with?
One of the big ones is like making a difference, like having a positive impact with people around the world. Giving back, trust is a big one, caring, like just respect, trust, those kind of things. That is like, I want to make sure that the people I'm around also kind of have the same values as me. So like they're getting a respectful, trusting, happy, funny India, but in return I'm making sure that they're also like contributing to my life in a positive way.
Do you think your friends and the people you knock around with have similar values to you?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like one of the biggest things with me is I'm a very good judge of character, so I can honestly like pick up on people and their like true, honest actions from a far distance. So I'm very careful around who gets close. Obviously I'm friendly with everyone, but being like a close friend, I only have my core like support system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we did a podcast with a guy called Mac Horton.
Yeah.
He's an Olympic gold medalist in the 400 back in Rio. And he went through this whole drama. I'm not sure if you remember. It was like he called out one of the other competitors for, I think, being like essentially being a drug cheat. And because he was.
Okay, fair.
I believe, if I've got that right. And I think he called it out. He called him out after the semi-final in the morning. This was at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And then the final was that night. And so that time in between, he said it was wild with like media and like everyone was trying to get a hold of him. And he's like, I felt really bad because he thought like, am I doing the right thing here? Like, or I may, and he, I think, like, yeah, he was all this media stuff was happening. And then he came back to this stage where he's like, well, what do my friends and family think? Because they probably have the values and probably perspective that I have, because that's what I knock around. That's the people I knock around with. And so he sat down with them and essentially was just like, yeah, he was doing the right thing. He actually didn't end up standing on the podium, I believe, if I've got that correct. Hopefully I've got that right. But there was a few things that he didn't do because it wasn't something that he believed in.
Yeah.
And there was a really beautiful clip on the podcast that we did with him of how he was describing it. Obviously I did not describe that very well. but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a very interesting thing where it's just like, yeah, the crew that you knock around with, of course, like if they align with your values and belief, then of course that's who you're going to lean on in like difficult times.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
Great sounding board.
Yeah.
You mentioned something before when you were younger, especially like going through that thing with the brands and whatnot about like not feeling like you're good enough. I think that conversation I have a lot with professional athletes, people who sit on that far end of the spectrum where they are trying like so hard and they probably have a lot of success, but sometimes it can stem from that feeling of not being good enough, whether that's in your sport, in a professional setting, whether that's with aesthetics. I know I've been there as well.
Yeah.
How are you feeling now? Because I look at you as someone who's like incredibly confident, like, and you talk about these values. How does that sit with you now?
I've come a long way for sure. Like ever since I moved up here and kind of, I feel like I hit rock bottom for a while. And then once I was able to kind of learn ways to deal with that and kind of come back from that, that's when I was able to really find myself and find what makes me happy. And the values were such a big learning piece for me, because even when stuff kind of got hard or I had to make big decisions, as long as I knew that it was in line with my values, it never felt wrong. Like I always felt like it's the right decision if it's in line with my values, because that's what I care about. So I feel like I've come a long way, but I definitely went through times where it was like ridiculously hard and I isolated myself, and I also did like distance education. So I did homeschooling for a bit as well at home, like in Victoria. And that was so hard because I wasn't around my peers and I wasn't leaning on anyone. I was surfing by myself every day. And it was just like when you're in your head so much, that's, I feel like, where that overthinking and that perfectionism comes in, because you're just nitpicking every detail of everything. So every surf I went, if I didn't land a turn, I was splashing the water for an hour. Like I was so angry because I wasn't perfect. And it wasn't until I learnt that you can't be perfect and that those imperfections make you who you are and stuff like that. That's when I was able to kind of let go a bit and not be as hard on myself.
How did you go with managing emotions, like through that perfectionism period?
Horrible.
Really?
Oh my God.
Really?
I was literally, I don't know how my coaches worked with me. You wouldn't think it, but I was the angriest person in the world. Because
you were the most kindest, like, nicest person ever. So yeah. I couldn't even imagine that.
Yeah. Like 5 years ago, I was seriously, my friends didn't even want to surf with me. Like,
what? Give me an example.
it was the perfectionism thing and being so hard on myself and not feeling good enough that I'd just lash out and be so angry. So I'd come in from a surf so pissed off that I didn't catch 10 waves and I didn't complete every wave and this and that. Or if my coach has told me to go out and do this, I go out there and I feel like I haven't done it. I come in and they're like, oh, how'd you go? I was like, that was fucking shit. Like, I'm so bad. I just can't fucking do it. And I'd just be swearing and they just like, just take a breath and then they'd send me back out and I'd just be splashing the water.
Yeah.
And I was just so negative and I couldn't get out of it. And I was just like, and they were just trying to figure out why is she so angry.
But are you conscious of that at the time?
I am, but I also couldn't understand why they couldn't see why I was angry. I was like, you should be angry at me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. Why aren't you angry? Because I'm not doing it. Like, understand my frustrations because I really want to do it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, you can't expect to just go nail the turn first try. Like, it takes time. I'm like, but it shouldn't take this long. And it was, so all of the emotions, instead of it being like sadness, this and that, it was just pure anger. And then I started punching my boards. And then I'd lose a heat and I'd be out in the water just punching my boards. And then I'd really hurt my knuckles or something. And then I'd like tape it for a few weeks. And then I couldn't stop and I couldn't figure out what it was until I started working with my sports psych. And then we started like really deep diving it. And I just didn't know any other emotion. Like,
that was it.
That was all I knew.
Wow.
It was like,
anger was the only emotion that you would just resort to because that's all you knew.
Yeah. So I was actually just genuinely upset and sad, but those emotions weren't coming out because I only knew anger. So I wouldn't cry. I'd just punch my board.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wild. And that went on for years, like a long, long time.
Do you reckon that, like from a performance point of view, do you reckon that helped you get to where you, like as being like a really great surfer, or do you reckon that actually hindered you long term? What's your view on that?
It's hard because the perfectionism part and surfing for 6-7 hours a day, just because I'm like, I haven't done it, so I'm going to stay out here.
Yeah.
Obviously, that time in the water and surfing so much definitely helped me become a better athlete or better surfer, but it made me a less approachable, not so fun version of myself.
Yeah.
And so there was a few years where I just wasn't enjoying what I was doing and I was just doing it and hating that I wasn't better. So it was a really weird balance, and I think my coach has really struggled to kind of navigate that as well, because they're like, she's such a talent, but how do we do this? Because like she's so hard to work with.
Far out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they really stuck with me, and they really had to work hard for it. But it wasn't until one of my coaches walked me into a room, sat me down, and then had the sports psych come in. And I think it took him 3 years just to get me to speak about like what was actually going on for me.
What do you mean? Were you just in there just saying like, oh, I'm fine, like, this is what?
I was a brick wall.
Yeah.
Like he would just be like, oh, so like, what are you feeling? How was your session? I'm like, it's fucking horrible. Like seriously, I don't understand like what's with like, I can't do this, but they're asking me to do this. And he's just like, oh my God. And he's like, so what do you see when you see this picture? And it was like, have you seen that picture of it's like a cartoon character and he's holding the balloons, and it's like about having thoughts, and like you can let the balloons go and the thoughts, like they can just be with you.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was that picture, and he was like, what do you see? I'm like, it's a guy holding balloons. And he's like, yeah, but what's in the balloons? Like, what are the emotions? I'm like, I don't know. Like, it says that it's this, this, and this. And he's just like, fuck. Like, oh my God.
Props to him for sticking around for the 3 years. Yeah.
But it worked. He is amazing, and it all came down to like deep diving what was truly going on for me, and that stuff that happened with sponsors and the way I was treating myself and all of those like small events that led me to like having this anger. It was more from the self-conscious sadness. Like it was just showing up in anger.
Was there a breakthrough where the sports psych was like, oh, you've actually Like you haven't got through, but it's like you're making progress.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of the times, like a couple years ago, and I think I ended up in tears, and he was just like, "Oh my gosh, you can cry,"
Yeah.
and like I think that was the time where he'd finally got me to understand the difference in emotions and why they show up and why they're important, and then also breaking down why it was that I only knew anger and that my family, like the way that my family grew up, my dad and my mum and everything, they're the same, honestly. Like they probably aren't so emotionally aware. And so anger, and even my brothers, like they just get angry. So it was kind of just like a patterned effect that I kind of learnt from my surroundings.
Yeah.
And we just never really get taught about emotions,
Yeah.
which is so bizarre to me. But I think that's something that, yeah, all kids, and I think now it's becoming a bit more prominent, but yeah, back then we just didn't know.
That's it's such an interesting, because I haven't heard many people talk about the whole emotion piece as well growing up, because it's just, I don't know, I think I'm saying to you, like growing up wasn't really a thing.
No.
Like it wasn't like I wouldn't know how to process emotion.
Yeah.
For sure. You just be like, go out on the footy field and you'd be like, oh, I'm just going to be angry and be aggressive and be, but I thought, oh, I'm just being competitive.
Yeah.
You know, like I just want to win. Like, isn't it good to win?
Yes.
Like that's the way I thought it was. It probably wasn't until I was like 23, 24 playing professionally where I was just like, oh, like there's other ways to go about it. Don't get me wrong, like you still want to be aggressive on the footy field.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
But not to the point of kicking chairs and punching board. There was a clip that went viral of me kicking a chair when I got sent off for the second time. So embarrassing. I didn't have many highlights. That was one of the highlights. But that's so what stuff like were you doing with your sports psych? Was there like any like tips and tricks, or is it no matter just like talking through what was going on?
Yeah, a lot of talking, and honestly, like I said, I was a brick wall and he could not get through to me. Like I just wasn't ready to hear it, and I wasn't ready for him to tell me that what I was doing was wrong. Like I wasn't ready for it, but he was very persistent, and he'd do it in ways where it would the way that it got through to me was reframing it to make me know that this will help you be a better athlete.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So if he could frame it in a way, he's like, India, if you are able to understand why these emotions are showing up, why you're doing these things that are actually holding you back, then we can work through it, and then you're actually going to achieve a lot more. And I think that's when I was like, okay, maybe I'll listen. If it's going to help me become better and it's going to make me a little less angry, sure, let's give it a go.
That sounds like the light bulb, especially for someone like yourself who from growing up, you're doing all the little 1%ers.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, actually, this is probably going to help you be a better athlete.
Yeah.
Oh, well, fuck, maybe I'll give this a go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So once he then figured out that that's how I kind of operate, everything since is like, even when he sends me to, like when I've had to go to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or something, he'd be like, I know you don't want to do this, but it probably actually is needed if you want to get better.
Yeah, right.
Oh, fine, I'll show up just because it's going to actually help.
How do you go with the younger girls? Because I know that you do a lot of work with younger girls, and I usually find like when people are really passionate about a certain thing, they've usually got a personal experience to it, right? And I see what you do with Queen and Me and all the stuff you do with the younger girls. And and after hearing your story, like I get it, like I understand. What are some of the things that you're telling them around body image, confidence, values? Because it seems like you've obviously learnt so much going through it yourself.
Yeah, which I have. Like I have learnt so much. And one of the biggest things that's come out of it, now that I'm not in that bubble, I can then now see how much of an effect the social media and the brands are having on these young girls. Because they're just seeing what they think they should look like and what they think they should be if they want to succeed and get a sponsor. Because when you're a young surfer, it doesn't matter if you're getting paid, you just want a sticker on your board and you'll do anything to get it. So my biggest thing is like, how can I help these girls understand who they are at a younger age so they're not forced into a position where they're losing themselves and becoming someone they're not comfortable with, and then that'll then lead to more issues down the line. So if I can get to them at a younger age and provide them with like the values tool and teach them how that they can use their values to be who they want to be and what they want to achieve, then I feel like that's gonna like prolong the issues. Like I feel like if they have this tool, they're not going to fall into that trap of peer pressure and social media and everything like that.
Well, learning the tools at a younger age would, of course, help.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I always think, like, if I had someone who had played professional sport but then also had a foundation in psychology or someone that I could relate to, I was like, would have made so many less mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, right? And even just, like, being more comfortable. Like, being more comfortable with yourself. Because you're doing stuff. Like Queen and Me, I'd love to talk about your business and what you're doing in that. How did that come about? Was it just like knocking around with younger girls?
No, so it was actually when I left Roxy, when I left that brand, and I was sponsorless, didn't have a sticker or anything, and once I learnt that tool and stuff like that, I was like, gosh, there's so, like, the surf industry for the young girls is like, no one's focusing on how talented they are. They're focusing on what they look like. So let's provide a platform that's going to like help the young girls just show how talented they are.
Yeah.
So even through COVID, we ran a social media contest, and it was just like all the girls just posting their clips, and it was just flooding feeds with surf content and like, how talented are these girls?
Sick.
And so it kind of stemmed from that. But then as it's grown and I've grown, I'm like, the bigger issue here is like they're not comfortable with who they are, and they're falling into peer pressure groups, not even just in surfing, but like in schools when you're going through like that puberty phase, and there's friend groups doing one thing and you're over here but you want to be with them, the cool group, and it's like, how do you navigate that and how do you deal with like those pressures? So I think that's when I was like, oh, if I can start running like camps and providing tools, that'll be amazing. So that's what I did, and I ran a few surf camps, and I just loved it, and seeing like the impact that it had on these young girls was like so fulfilling.
Has there been any standout moments that you were like, oh, that was special?
Yeah, one of the girls, so we did the values talk, and we talked about having hard conversations if like if you've got like your group of people, right, and you want to have certain people on your bus, and they've got to be like people that are supporting you, this and that. But if they're not, have a hard conversation, because it's not worth having someone in your life that's kind of going to hold you back. And one of the girls, a few weeks later, the mum came and told us that the girl, she was, I think, 10, she went up to her friend at school and was like, I'm sorry, but we can't be friends because I don't think that you're good for me at the moment. I think we should just not be friends. And so she went up to this girl that like was kind of being a bit mean to her, but they were friends at the time. And she just told her like, hey, we're not going to be friends anymore. We're going to just not hang out.
Wow.
And when the mum told me that, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's actually like what you're doing is like making genuine impact.
It resonated with them.
Yeah,
like, and she was only 10.
Wow.
Like so young.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, if I can make this more accessible and provide girls around the world a workshop or something that or even on social media, providing them with empowering and educational content, then let's do that, because I'm in a privileged position where I have professionals helping me. But now I want to make that tool a bit more accessible.
But it sounds like those camps and even workshops that you do, like that's creating an environment and probably a community where girls they're coming there with probably similar values, and they're probably getting little things like, oh, maybe I want to knock around with this crew.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah, and they make new friends, and it's just like they all have same interests, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I love that. What's the plan with it? What's the do you have like a long-term goal with it at all?
Yeah. So at the moment it's just trying to develop the workshop and push that to schools and kind of sporting facilities. And then eventually I want to turn it into a non-for-profit, and then hopefully take it to kind of some of the small world countries that don't have as much, and kind of just provide to people that don't have that access.
I think there will definitely be an appetite for schools and even workshops, even like to be honest, even like probably corporate environments.
Yeah.
I think that would be such a huge piece. So I love what you're doing in that space.
Yeah.
I think that's a very exciting piece, and I'm keen to see how it's going to progress.
Yeah,
for sure.
thank you.
I think like one of the big reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you today is the concussion piece.
Yeah.
Like I think we spoke how you've had a couple months out of the water, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it because like obviously I've been there as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting conversation for different genders, different sports, but same injuries or similar injuries. And I'm conscious of how to start the conversation. Where do you think your, I guess, story started with concussion? Like when did you first started like having these conversations?
So 2021, I got my board to my temple and it just really knocked me around, and I didn't tell anyone, and I thought it wasn't too bad because like I just didn't know anything. And so I kept going to the gym. I surfed the next day, and then it was 3 days later we were in the gym supposed to do like some testing, and I was like just got so like white in the face and was like, far out, I'm so weak. And my trainer just looked at me and knew instantly something was like off, but they thought I was sick. And I was like, no, my board hit me and I just haven't been the same. And so then they sent me to do like a concussion screening and stuff. And yeah, they were like, oh, you've been concussed. Like you should have come in sooner. And I was like, I had no idea. Like I genuinely like thought that you had to be out cold for it to be a concussion.
So just like you thought you had to be knocked out before, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And at that point in time, honestly, concussions hadn't even been a topic of conversation in surfing because it's seen as a non-contact sport, right? Like we're just surfing and like, yeah, we fall, but it's water, it's not. But in reality, we're falling at a very high speed, and if a board hits you, like, of course, concussion's going to happen in surfing. So I was kind of like, I felt like the test dummy at that point. I was just like, because they were learning as I was learning. And so in that first one, I literally just sat in a black room for 6 weeks and I just didn't do anything because they didn't know what else to do.
Really?
Yeah.
Just like almost trying to let your brain recover?
Yeah, it was just like I couldn't handle any light. I couldn't look at screens, like, and I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was just like, oh, I just can't do anything. And so that's what I did. I just did nothing.
Yeah.
But since then, and now that I've gone through more and learnt so much more, there's actually recovery tools that you can use, and you don't have to be locked in a dark room 24/7.
It sounds like like talk about like for your mental health, that sounds like a pretty tough thing, yeah.
Torture.
Yeah.
It is like, and for me being an active person, like the way I dealt with my mental health issues and stuff was by being active. And my biggest thing that I would distract myself. I never really wanted to deal with issues, but I would just keep moving so that I didn't have to focus on them.
Yeah.
And to be put in a room for 6 weeks with no one around me, it was like, okay, well, now I actually can't run away from these issues. So it was just like all hit at once.
Wow.
Like you have suppressed all of these issues. Here they are. Deal with this.
Wow.
And I was just like, crap.
Who are you talking to?
My sports psych.
Yeah.
So he was with me through it all, and then I got referred to another, like a clinical psychologist as well. And then it was just trying to manage like me not being able to do anything. So how are we going to make her feel somewhat okay? And it was just like a very slow process of just trying to get through the day and just take it for what it was.
It's I understand that concussion and TBIs, it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
Like it is, and it's hard because headlines travel really fast and science takes time.
Yeah.
And there is, like, to be honest, I'm similar to you. I want to learn more about it because you've been through it, right? You got a personal experience. You want to learn more about it. I think the more conversations is really great. But what's actually gonna help us? And I talk to a lot of guys, especially in the rugby league space. Like like that's obviously a very high contact sport.
Yeah.
and people have like different symptoms, whether it's like the sensitivity to light is a big one, irritability, isolation, not wanting to talk to other people. I know irritability was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's, but understanding that your brain's just recovering.
Yeah.
And like, that was a big thing for me, is like just knowing that you just got to give it time. But it's hard because like, you can't be like, oh, if you get 5 concussions, then you're going to be out, or 3 concussions. It's like, you might have 10 hits to the head and be fine. Or you might just get 1 hit to the head and be out for 6 weeks. It's such a complex issue.
Yeah.
And there's not a one size fits all.
No.
Which is what I've come to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And I was the same. Like the first one, I recovered about 8 weeks later, and I was pretty good. Like I didn't have many issues going forward from that. And then I got another one when I was in Hawaii at the end of 2021, and I then decided to surf the last contest of the year because I needed to do it to qualify.
Was it just like a board to the head or hit the water?
It was the same thing. The wind just picked up my board and it got me on the other side of the temple. And I was just like, shit. Like,
just innocuous,
Yeah, I was just like, oh God, like, fuck. And I paddled up to my friend, and then I called my doctors and everything, and I had 2 weeks until the last event. And I was like, I have to do the event because I want to qualify. So I ended up doing it. I ended up qualifying, and then I only had 3 or 4 weeks until the first event of the season started at Pipe. And that's when I kind of got put in a room with all of my team, and they were like, look, you haven't recovered, and if you go and surf on tour, you're going to prolong things, and you could end up developing post-concussion syndrome.
Is this Challenger series, or is this just WSL?
World Tour.
WSL?
Yeah, World Tour, yeah.
Yeah,
WSL.
gotcha. So is this the first time that you're on tour as well?
Yeah, my rookie season.
So this is the conversation, right? Because like, I imagine you would have you've tried so hard since you were a little grom to get to the point where now you've actually on the tour, you've made the tour, and now you've got a little step back, and someone's just like, well, nah, you're still not recovered. But it's everything that you want, right? Like you want to get there, you're there.
Yeah.
And to be told to be pulled back? Maybe?
Yeah. So they, like you just explained, I'd been working towards that my whole life. Only 5 girls qualify. Like, it is so hard to qualify for the World Tour.
Yeah.
So I was in a position where I'd finally achieved my dream, right?
Yeah.
And then to be put in a room where they're all just telling me, these are the consequences if you do this, straight over my head. I was like, fuck you all. I'm not forfeiting my spot on tour.
Yeah.
Like, it's my rookie year. I'm going to compete. And they're like, you should not do this. Like, and especially pipeline, like the most dangerous wave in the world, you're concussed and you want to go hurt yourself even more. I was like, oh, look, I get that. I understand that I probably shouldn't surf in that event. So I ended up pulling out of pipe.
Probably smart.
Probably, yeah, good idea. Which was still, I was in tears for hours on the beach. I was like, God, because I paddled out for my first heat at Pipeline because it was like 2 foot. It was tiny. And I stood up once, I think, and went straight and then like came in. Just because I wanted to say I surfed the first event at Pipe. Yeah. And then the next heat came around and I had to pull out and I was in tears and it was like full breakdown. And I was just like, oh, this sucks. But I went on to compete the rest of the season and far out. I think by the time Bells came around, which was the 3rd event or 4th event, I was just like, okay, this is like not working.
What do you mean?
I was struggling with fatigue so bad. And I was at each event, I was barely surfing. I was just kind of surfing my heats just because I didn't have the energy. But then at Bells, I started to get real bad back issues and I was just like, what am I doing? Like I couldn't fire myself up. Yeah. And then I lost in Margaret River and fell off tour and then it just like all hit me and it was just like full burnout. Yeah. Just like everything just accumulated and I was just like, I am done. Like I was down for the count. I didn't even enjoy competing. Like I was so unwell. Wow. Yeah, it was really bad.
It sounds like when people talk about a roller coaster, professional sport being a roller coaster, it's like you've got to the height of making what you want to do. You've got there.
Yeah.
Injuries pushing back, and then you even get to the point where you're like, I don't want to surf at the moment, which is like probably your coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Like where you just like what you've always done.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've never felt that like where every time I paddle out for a heat, it's like, yeah, I want to win. Like I'm going to do everything I can. Got to the point where I was just like, oh shoot, got to go surf. Like this is going to be hard. And like was just fighting to get through that 30-minute heat.
Yeah.
And then I'd come in and I was just like, oh, I don't have the energy to like even debrief with my coach. Like I'm just like, don't talk to me. I was a shell of myself. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. And then it all caught up to me. And like, again, like I had to deal with the consequences because I made that choice. They warned me. They told me this could happen, but it all went over my head because I didn't know what the bad situation even looked like. I couldn't comprehend it. And I just thought, what's worse, dealing with a bit of concussion stuff or like dealing with the fact I didn't surf on tour?
And it's a hard one because you can't actually see it.
Yes.
Like it's not like a broken arm or a laceration. It's like you can't see it and it's like, oh, well, I might be fine. Like it might be okay.
Yeah.
What did you do? Because how long ago was that?
So that was 2021.
21.
And then I surfed so 2022 I was on tour and fell off. Yeah.
So you said it was a pretty dark time.
Yeah.
Off tour.
Yeah.
Lack of fatigue. What'd you do?
Well, so it was pretty much after Margies and stuff. And then when I felt like I didn't want to compete anymore, I just said like, I'm done. Like I'm not competing. Like I'm over it. And so I came back up here with my team and stuff. And I was just like, guys, I'm so unwell. Like I don't even talk to me. So I did like, I isolated for a bit, didn't like speak to anyone. I was just kind of going through the motions by myself. And then they kind of came over and tried to speak to me, this and that. And I was like, I just can't do it. Cause like, it was more the fact that I was competing on tour and it was a dream to be on tour, but I wasn't able to be at my best. So it was like that thing of me always wanting to be 100% and give 100%. Because I wasn't able to do that, I felt like I'd really failed and it felt like I didn't achieve what I wanted to, and it just didn't feel like it was an accomplishment. And even like I got good results and stuff, it was just like, it's not the same because I feel like I didn't give enough.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the piece I was really struggling with, was like, I know that like it was hard and it was just that I wasn't at my best.
It's hard when you've got such high expectations on yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a huge piece where it's just like, it's one thing to go out and have fun and enjoy it, but someone who's wired like yourself, you want to do well. And if you can't get to the level where you want to get to, I imagine it's just like, well, that's not it. Like, let me step away. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did take a huge step back. I like, for the rest of 2000, it was like 8 months I took off competing. I was just like, let's just work on fixing my head. Like, I have some deep-seated issues. Let's address those. And so it was purely like just try to fix the concussion and the issue that was my head. But I wasn't addressing the other issues. Yeah. I was just focusing on my head. And so, yeah, I did that for 8 months and I started to get better and was working towards the Challenger event at Snapper, and I just felt like it was all kind of coming back and I was finding that joy and that like, oh, I love this. And
you were getting the joy back, getting back into it?
Yeah.
Was it just a matter of stepping away from it, do you think?
I think it was stepping away, but also just having the energy again, like having to take a few months out and like taking a step back and stuff. Yeah, that gave me like a bit more energy and like gave me another outlook of like, yeah, I actually really do want this and it's been taken away, but like, let's go for it again. And so, yeah, but then I got hit in the head again and it was just...
Oh my God. The bloody roller coaster of concussions.
Yeah.
Far out.
The last 3 years has just been concussion after concussion for me.
It's wild.
And I think, honestly, the reason I keep getting them is because I was not looking after myself and wasn't addressing the bigger issues that I had. So I feel like it was a way of being told by the universe or something like, deal with this or we're going to make you deal with it. And so, yes, I dealt with it that 8 months I took off, but then I got hit again. That was unfortunate because some guy just kicked his board out and I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then after I got hit in the head again, I pretty much just made the exact same mistakes I made the other time. And I competed through concussions and whatnot. But I did do it in a lot safer way because I'd learnt so much from the time previous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got through the season. I ended up qualifying again and I was on tour again this year. Yeah, I was on tour earlier this year and it was better than the last time, but I still wasn't completely better.
Yeah.
I never really got 100% better. And then it was pretty much just like a repeat of what I did last time. And I came out of it when I fell off and was just like, what were you thinking? You just made the same mistakes. But at the same time, it's that thing of balancing those choices of like mentally I wasn't prepared to let those dreams and goals go and I wasn't ready to prioritize my health, but then I have to deal with the consequences.
I do feel for you. Because I get it. I know how you feel 100%.
Yeah.
And it sucks. It is a terrible feeling knowing that all you want to do is just give it your all, but you can't do it because you're limited, right?
Yeah.
And I do really feel for you. Even when we first caught up at Palmy Surf Club, like talking through it, because it's I think when you've been through it, like you sort of like empathize with someone because like you get it, right? And it sucks. You've just come back from 4 months out of the water.
Yeah.
What's the biggest learning do you think that you've taken out of the last 3 years? Because obviously, whether that's with the concussion or whether that's what do you think is the biggest learning from that?
Honestly, I'd say that this time around, like having to take 4 months straight out of the water, not doing anything except for focusing on my overall health, I think I've come to realize how much the different areas of our health impact our brain and can slow you down and stop you from recovering. And I think for me, if I had have noticed or learnt more at an earlier stage, then I would have been able to address some of these issues and the recovery from my concussions probably would have been a lot shorter.
Yeah.
But through the process, I've been able to learn a lot about the brain, the recovery tools, and then also, going through the process of like how much like my mental health stuff is impacting my recovery from concussion, and then the adrenal fatigue and stuff that I was feeling, that was coming from another area where it was like in my stomach. And so like I feel like I just learnt a lot about how to notice the signs in my own body and knowing when to pull back and take a bit of time to recover and slow down.
It seems like you're doing all the right things, right?
Yeah.
Like we surfed this morning, so like surfing with a helmet, even like capping your the time out in water as well to 45 minutes. So it seems like you're ticking all the boxes. Do you feel that?
Yeah, and that is something I want to get it right this time. Like I've spent the last 3 years pretty much just in a prolonged concussion state.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it and that's from my own fault. But now that I'm doing all the right things and trying to get really, really healthy again, I'm trying to do all the little things right and not rush the process, because I feel like I've always rushed it and that's put me further back. So this time around, it's like, take it slow. Don't push it past your threshold. If you feel tired, go rest for a bit, recover, come back.
Because how old are you now?
I'm 23.
India, you've got so much time.
I know.
Oh my God, you've got so much time. But to be honest, like that's, for me, it's obviously a great thing. Because like what's the goals? Like the goal is to get back on tour?
Yeah, goal is to get back on tour, win a world title, and then go to the Olympics, LA 28. Yeah.
India, so much time, so much time. Does that does that I guess like help the fact of like someone like you, I imagine you just want to get back in the water. Like even this morning when it was like howling northerlies and it was shit, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get out. I'm like, oh my god, you're frothing at the moment, which is sick to see.
Yeah.
That must be a cool thing to know that you do have a lot of time and then you can actually like see how to get there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of, it's fulfilling knowing that I've done it before and I did it in a pretty unhealthy state. So I know that like if I can get better, then I should have no issues getting back on tour and I'll be better than I was. So I do hold on to that. And it's just like, okay, just get better and everything else will fall into place.
I've seen a lot of athletes come back from big head knocks.
Yeah.
So there was a guy, Tamari Martin, who played in the NRL. He had some big head knocks. I think I don't know if he had a bleed on the brain, but it was pretty wild. And same thing, like he was in his room for 6 months, couldn't go out because the light was actually just so intense for him. He really struggled. He's that was maybe like 4 years ago.
Yeah,
he's back playing. He's back playing really good, and it's a hard thing, right? Because there's obviously going to be mixed opinions on what people want to do, right? But at the end of the day, like it's your call.
Yeah,
it's your decision, and I think if you're really honest with yourself on how you're feeling, then that's got to be the whole thing. Like when I got medically retired from the NRL, I was 24. I was 24, wow. So like 2-3 years ago, and I went, and same thing, I had like a heap of concussions back in 2019, got sat on the sideline for 6 months, turned to 12 months with COVID, came back after that time feeling like, same as you, like so pumped and ready to play. Like I was like the fittest I'd ever been, like came back, played the rest of the season at the Titans, got signed by the Parramatta Eels, who was a top 4 side. Like we were going to go to the grand final. We actually did go into the grand final that final year. And I was just like, I was so pumped to be back. Yeah. But then I had a whole heap of concussions in 2021. Same thing, go see the neurologist. And I was at the point where I was just like, I'm going to be honest. Like, I'm going to be fully honest with the neurologist here. Like, because I want to be good when I'm older, right? Like, I don't want to, in rugby league environment, it's very much like, especially back in the day, it was like, it's a sign of bravery to like get knocked out and then get back up and keep playing. Like, that's what it was like.
Yeah.
And so, but it's obviously changed over time. And I was like, well, I'm just going to be honest with him. And so I told him all about the symptoms of like irritability and like fatigue and like couldn't do 100 meters without sleeping for the whole afternoon, like little things like that.
Yeah.
And he was just like, Keys, like and I had a heap of concussions prior to 2019 as well.
Right.
Some diagnosed, some that just fly under the radar. And so he's like, look, you've had a heap of concussions. Like you've got so much more going on outside of footy. And he recommended that I should medically retire based on what I told him and based on all the screening, same thing, all the testing, brain scans and all the testing. And he recommended that I did it. Yeah. And I reckon if I genuinely pushed back and didn't tell him my symptoms, like, yeah, I'm fine, like fatigue, what's fatigue? I feel great. Like I probably could have gone back and play. Yeah. But I was so honest, like I was just honest with myself. And to be honest, like it was like for me in my situation, it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Yeah. It allowed me to like do the podcast, allowed me to get into psychology. Yeah. It allowed me to meet so many incredible people. Like, and I wouldn't change anything. And I think that's the biggest piece that I tell crew who are in the NRL or who are have had similar situations. Like I think as long as you're honest with yourself, with your symptoms and with your stuff, like it might be to the point where it's like you might have to take 12 months off. You might. It's not to say you can't come back, but have that time. Yeah. And just not like fake the symptoms. Yeah. Or not fake the symptoms, sorry. Like not just not tell the symptoms. Yeah. Right? Because I think that's probably a huge piece. And it sounds like you're in that spot now where you've probably learnt by fire from doing all the stuff. Yeah. And now you're in the stage where it's like, nah, like I want to win world title. I want to get back, but I want to do it properly. Yeah. I think 100%. That's the coolest piece.
Yeah, definitely.
Fuck. So wild.
Yeah. It's an insane journey.
I love where you're at. How are you feeling? How are you feeling at the moment?
I feel better, a lot better in certain areas. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Like the 4 months that I had off to address those other issues were just like kind of light bulb moments in time, just like, oh, no wonder. Like, it was just clear as day once we figured that out. So it was like, okay, well, now that we've done this and this, and then I started to see results in the gym and I was able to handle a lot more. I was like, okay, we're actually making progress here. Like, I haven't been able to do these things for years and now we're able to do it without symptoms. Like, we're on the right track. And it's like you just said, like, just trusting your body and your judgments, not pushing past your thresholds. And then, I'm kind of just doing that day by day.
So happy. I'm so glad we did this.
Me too.
I'm like, I know it's been in the pipeline for a little while now, but I'm so glad we got to get a little wave this morning. India, what do you think is the biggest thing that we haven't spoken about today that you'd like to touch on before we finish up?
I think, again, just touching on like the overall, you know, when you get injured and you keep getting injured and you're just like, oh, why do I keep getting injured? But like, actually deep diving why do these things keep occurring. I think once I was able to do that, we then figured out, I was then diagnosed with ADHD. That explains why my brain wasn't recovering at the speed it was, because it already is in a hyperactive state. And then my fatigue, okay, you have endometriosis. No wonder your body couldn't recover and heal and you didn't have the energy because it was fighting something else. So like deep diving into that why, instead of just like, oh, like feeling sorry for yourself, like, why does this keep happening? Actually take a second to just be like, okay, why is this happening? Be curious and like lean on the people around you, because that's if I didn't have those people around me, I'd be long gone.
I bet. Thank you so much for your time today. I've got so much respect for you for just being so open about your journey. I think that's super important, and I think the young girls and everyone are very lucky to have you talking to them. So I'm excited to see. Excited to see you back on tour and just grinding and trying to get back there. So thanks again for the conversation. I think it's been amazing.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Love it.